The USA defeated Jamaica and Northern Ireland in 2 consecutive friendlies in March. There's a lot to be positive about, a lot to be excited about, and a lot of progress was made. We learned a ton. We're breaking it all down right here on 11 Yanks. Okay guys, the last 2 weeks of March was filled with good friendlies for the senior team and a very disappointing Olympic qualification campaign for the under-23s. I've addressed that in a video right after the game. I'm probably not going to address it again. I want to talk about what we learned from the senior team friendlies. Let's start off by talking about the big picture, and 4-3-3 continues to develop. We saw it against Jamaica. We were able to keep possession of the ball, switch play. We're starting to see the team understand the tactical nuances of playing the 4-3-3, and credit goes to Gregg Berhalter for continuing to inculcate that style into the team. We dominated, we kept the ball, we created opportunities. Well done. Now in the second game, we tried to play a 3 at the back with some of our substitute personnel. It was okay, but I don't think it was as good as it could have been, simply because we didn't really take advantage of the advantages of a back 3 formation. How? Let's have a look at the tactics board.
Okay, so against Northern Ireland, we went with this 3-4-2-1 formation. Now, in principle, having 3 at the back is supposed to release your fullbacks, Robinson and Dest in this case, to play as wingbacks and get higher up the field, provide width, and also not give them as much defensive responsibility. It's supposed to take advantage of their attacking instincts while covering for some of their defensive liabilities, which they both have. The problem with playing a 3-4-2-1, especially with this group of players, is that you don't have balance, width, and depth on the field. Let me explain what I mean. Essentially, you have Pulisic and Reyna playing as central midfielders behind Siba Chu. What does that do? Now you've got 4 guys here in central midfield who are congesting the midfield. And then you have Siba Chu, whose game is to what? Drop deep and hold up the ball, which by the way, I thought he did pretty well. But what does this formation lack? Penetration. Now, in principle, Robinson and Dest are supposed to be able to get up the field, but it doesn't quite work that way. The whole concept of having 4 midfielders is that you have guys making hard runs in behind the back line, which isn't exactly the strength of Siebatcheu, Dest, or Robinson. Dest is more of a come inside and combine with midfield than try to make hard runs onto through balls in behind. Robinson is a little more that way. He's more likely to make that run in behind, but Siba Chu is really not. We saw Siba Chu drop deep and hold up the ball really well, and by the way, he also did a lot of really strong defensive work, but essentially when our midfield had the ball, there wasn't enough runners that they could hit with through passes. We saw it slightly different in the second half, when Daryl Dike was making those runs in behind, and both Aaronson, De La Torre, and Pulisic were all able to find him with through balls. If we're going to play with a 3-man back line, I would much prefer a 3-4-3, where you have 3 forwards playing very narrow, and then you can have guys like Acosta, Robinson, Dest, Musa try to find them with through balls. The other version of a back 3 line would be a 3-5-2 like you see here, with Siba Chu playing as a center forward, and then Pulisic sort of as a roaming center forward, where he can either drift wide to get on the ball and then drive in field, or he can play as sort of a second forward in and behind Siba Chu. This not only prevents midfield congestion because Siba Chu will be stretching the back line, but it also creates little pockets of space for Pulisic to operate, and it allows Reyna to use his creativity and ability to play the ball through from central midfield. This would have been my ideal formation, and probably would have been better with a guy like Sargent or Dike up top, who is much better at stretching the back line than Jordan Siba Chu was.
Another thing that has concerned me for a while with this team is the defensive frailties. For the longest time, the US has been a bunker and counter team, try to hit the opponent on the counterattack, maybe get set pieces, and now we're transitioning into more of a possession style of play. That's great, we have the players to do it, and if we want to compete at the highest level, that's a good thing. The downside of that is that we could be vulnerable to counterattacks if we are not careful and understand how to play in such a way that even when we have possession of the ball, our shape is ready to gegenpress or to drop back and defend a counterattack if necessary. The 2 goals we conceded to Panama back in November, and both goals that we conceded in this camp to Northern Ireland and to Jamaica, were the result of counterattacks and a cascading series of errors where the team was not set up to defend the counterattack, and we paid the price for it. Now luckily, we scored more goals than we conceded, but we don't know if that's going to be the case in the future. And maybe this is something I will address more in the future, that if we're going to be a possession team, we have to be able to defend the counterattack and always keep that in the back of our minds. Otherwise, we could be punished, especially away on the road in CONCACAF. Anyways, overall, there was a lot to be excited about. It was a very good camp. We saw a lot of players. Let's dig into the player performances and talk about them. Before we do though, guys, if you're new to the channel, welcome. Smash that subscribe button. We have 2 videos a week now. If you're already subscribed, smash that like button. It helps other people to find us. Here we go. Let's talk about the players now, and first up is Zack Steffen. I came away from this camp with more question marks about Zack Steffen than I did answers. Although he did make the simple saves, he had a few moments in both games where I had real question marks about his distribution, and although I don't think he was responsible for either the goals that Jamaica or Northern Ireland scored, I do think that we have to ask, could he have done better on each of those goals? For me, the answer is yes. To be clear, Zack Steffen is still my #1 keeper and I think should start for us in World Cup qualifying, but not only is he making mistakes a little too frequently for me, he also just doesn't look as confident. His body language, his command of the penalty box, and his communication with his teammates doesn't have that swag from you want as a goalkeeper. And guys, this could be something to talk about in the future. Now, some people think that Matt Turner should be challenging Zack Steffen for that spot, and at this point, I disagree. Not only does Matt Turner also have problems with his distribution, we really haven't seen Matt Turner under a lot of pressure. I'd like to see Matt Turner a little more for the national team, maybe give him half a game against Switzerland right before Nations League, but until we see Matt Turner consistently play under a lot of pressure, I still think Zack Steffen should be #1, but it should be on Matt Turner, Ethan Horvath, and even David Ochoa to start putting pressure on Steffen. Reggie Cannon looked pretty poor defensively against Jamaica. It's odd because you think of Cannon as being a little bit better defensively and maybe not as good going forward, but against Jamaica, it was not good. Now, Cannon is still very young, so I'm not going to draw too many conclusions about this, and young players do tend to go up and down in performance, so I don't want to smash him too much, but the truth is, that backup spot behind Sergino Dest is still wide open. Could Brian Reynolds or DeAndre Yedlin look to push him? Time will tell. Sergino Dest showed that he can be effective both on the left and on the right in the attack, but I still have question marks about his defending on the left-hand side. Twice in the Jamaica game, he got caught out. Once when a long diagonal caught him off, and the other time when a simple 1-2 down the wing when he didn't track his man led to a cross inside our box. This, on top of the other times he's played left back for us where he's been a little bit shaky defensively, definitely makes me feel like Dest should play right back for the national team going forward. Robinson played a full 90 against Northern Ireland, and I thought that he showed well up until his injury. Yes, he didn't have a ton to do defensively because of the formation that we were playing, but he was effective going forward, he was solid in possession, he didn't make any obvious mistakes, and I think he put in a good shift. Yes, he should have crossed for Aaronson right at the very end, and he was limping back when Northern Ireland scored their goal, but based on the fact that he was injured, I'm not going to hold those moments against him. Chris Richards was able to get more playing time, although he didn't start, and I thought he should have gotten at least one start alongside John Anthony Brooks. He was mostly solid in the second game. He does still have worrying moments or moments of indecision. He's still very young, and I think over time he'll cut those moments out of his game as he continues to grow and progress with Hoffenheim. Aaron Long is widely disliked by a certain section of the fan base, but I think that Long complements John Brooks very, very well, and he showed it again. For all of Brooks' ability on the ball and in the air, Brooks can be a little bit shaky when the balls are played in behind him and he has to turn and sprint. Luckily, Long covers for him pretty well with his speed and athleticism, and he's also very good in the air. Yes, there are still question marks about his distribution, but I actually thought in these last 2 games, Aaron Long's distribution was better than it normally is. I think that Long and Brooks complement each other better than Miazga and Brooks do, because Miazga has similar problems as Brooks as far as his foot speed and his ability to defend on the turn, apart from being just unreliable as a defender. Let's talk about Kellyn Acosta, and this was probably one of the biggest discussion points of this camp. Now, Kellyn Acosta started the first game, and after the game, the narrative seemed to be from most of the media that not only did Kellyn Acosta play well, but that he should definitely be our backup to Tyler Adams. Personally, I didn't see it. First of all, let's clear something up. Kellyn Acosta did not play as a 6. It was sort of a false 6, because he wasn't going to get the ball off the midfielders the way that Tyler Adams did. Oftentimes, it was Yunus Musah who would drop back to receive the ball, and Kellyn Acosta would play more like an 8, which is actually where he plays for Colorado. Now, in the first half against Jamaica, he had time and space, and he was pretty competent on the ball. But in the second half, when Jamaica started to apply more pressure, that's when Kellyn Acosta really folded. He was heavily involved in failing to cover for the goal that Jamaica scored, and right after that, he received a beautiful ball from Chris Richards. It got caught under his feet, and he gave it away. Despite that, after the game, people were very impressed with him, and I just didn't see it. Come Northern Ireland, and he starts again. In the first half, not only did he give the ball away cheaply 3 separate times that led to direct counters from Northern Ireland, he also had 2 needless fouls that led to dangerous free kicks. He continued this form in the second half, repeatedly giving the ball away, passing out of bounds, passing behind players, unable to control with his first touch, and he almost allowed Northern Ireland to score late in the second half. When Brian Reynolds passed the ball to him, he completely goofed on it and then chased back to try and cover, was nutmegged by the Northern Ireland attacker, who then had a shot on goal. Guys, for me, Kellyn Acosta should be nowhere near the national team. I would rather have Jackson Yueill or Owen Otasowie or even Yunus Musah back up Tyler Adams if necessary than Kellyn Acosta on there. He is going to be a liability with and without the ball. Sebastian Lejet is another polarizing figure for the national team, and he has 2 things that he does really well. He's ball secure, he connects passes consistently, and he's very good at making late runs into the box and finishing opportunities. He isn't always going to be penetrative or incisive with his passing, but being secure and connecting the dots and being intelligent about when and where to pass is one of Lejet's strong points, and his performances for the US have showed that. He's one of those guys that generally plays better for his country than he does for his club, and I can see him playing a huge part in World Cup qualifying. Brenden Aaronson and Luca de la Torre were the guys who stood out for me the most, and their stock really went up. Not only do they both look alike, they also are very similar in terms of their 360-degree technique, their first touch, their vision, their intelligent passing, and both of them, despite not getting starts in either of these games, came off the bench and really impressed. Aronson scored a goal against Jamaica, De La Torre had an assist against Jamaica, and in the second half of the Northern Ireland game, De La Torre and Aronson both played gorgeous balls for Daryl Dike to try and score goals, which he didn't, and we'll get into that in just a second. But both of these guys are huge stock up for me. And by the way, when De La Torre came on against Northern Ireland, he played as a 6, and he instantly looked like a massive upgrade to Kellyn Acosta. Christian Pulisic struggled in the first half against Jamaica, but followed that up with a very solid performance against Northern Ireland. With his passing, his vision, his dribbling, he won and scored the penalty against Northern Ireland, and overall looked like a captain in that game. Gio Reyna actually played quite well against Jamaica despite several misses, and his body language really had me questioning his attitude and mentality. But against Northern Ireland, I thought he was so much better. Not only did he not get frustrated as easily, but he was incisive. Yes, his goal was a major deflection against Northern Ireland, but watch how he receives the ball and then quickly shimmies to fake the defender the wrong way to create space for himself. It's the small things that he does in those 1v1 situations that he uses to create space, and I'm very confident in Gio Reyna going forward into World Cup qualifying. Josh Sargent, for me, had a great game against Jamaica. His hold-up play was excellent, his combination play was excellent, his dropping back to help defend was good, and his beautiful assist where he wrong-footed the defender to go through on goal and square for Aronson was great. But the thing I loved the most about Josh Sargent was his off-ball movement. There was a moment against Jamaica where Josh Sargent and Gio Reyna were 2v2 against the defenders, and he didn't really have anywhere to go. So Sargent makes a diagonal run across Gio Reyna's paths, dragging the defender over with him and creating space for Gio Reyna to cut onto his left foot and have a shot on target. That kind of movement off the ball often goes unnoticed because it doesn't really make highlights, but if you watch the way he moves when his teammates have the ball, he is always creating space and opportunities, and for me, he used this camp to solidify his position as our number 1 striker. Siba Chu started against Northern Ireland, and I thought he played well in terms of his hold-up play. Particularly his little layoff for Christian Pulisic to win the penalty with the outside of his right boot was excellent. Pulisic tends to play well off of a big target striker, and we saw that. What I did not like from Siba Chu, though, was his lack of movement. It wasn't incisive, it wouldn't stretch the back line, he wouldn't use it to create space for his teammates, and when he wasn't holding up the ball and laying it off, he seemed a little bit static. He played better than I thought he would, but I still have question marks about whether or not he belongs in the first 2 or 3 forwards on this roster. Now, Dike came on in the last 30 minutes of the Northern Ireland game and immediately did what Siba Chu didn't, stretch the back line. His hard runs in behind not only forced the defensive line to drop, creating space for the midfielders, but he was found 3 separate times by Aaronson, Pulisic, and De La Torre. On the first through ball from Pulisic, he couldn't really get the ball out from under his feet, which is emblematic of his poor technique. I like Daryl Dike, but I do think he's going to have to improve technically with the ball at his feet. I like his movement and I like his ability to dominate in the air and to force defenders to react and adapt to him, and overall I thought it was an encouraging debut. Technically, I would still like to see him improve. What this camp showed me, though, is that we have 3 forwards who really impressed, and that's not even including Gio Reyna or Matthew Hoppe, who couldn't get a call-up this time. Personally, I don't think there's a need for Zardes or Altidore on this roster going forward. That's it for now, guys. Thanks so much for watching. Thank you very much to all the Patreons who make this show possible. You guys are heroes. Everybody have a fantastic week, and I will see you on Sunday.